Hi, welcome everybody here tonight. Very brave of you to come through this weather for such an important topic as the one we have for you tonight, as you can see in the back. My name is David Boeren. I work at Studium Generale as part of the university. We organize lectures, workshops, pub quizzes, you name it. And tonight we're going to talk about, I think, a topic that's been top of mind for the past month, but for the past year, Oxford Word of the Year 2024, Brainrot. So, as a warm-up, when I say brainrot, just scream the first thing that you think of to me. I will repeat. Bombardier crocodile, yes. More. Toong, 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 sahur. And he will come back. The lore will come back. Anything else? Ballerina cappuccina. Gooning, gooning. Yeah, that's older brainrot. Okay, now that's some good examples. We're going to talk about if this is important, if this is dangerous, if it's just nothing, and anything in between. And how we're going to do that? We'll try to answer that with two short lectures for you today and a discussion. First, we're going to talk about the sociology side of things. How does this happen? Where does it come from? Why does it happen? And then we're going to talk about the brain and if this is actually dangerous for you and if we're all fucked as a generation. So, two short lectures, and then it's time for some discussion afterwards. Then it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker to you. She is lecturer in new media and digital culture at the University of Amsterdam. And in her research, she looks at how memes are spread, how they are created, where they come from. Please give a warm welcome to Idil Galip.
Okay. Hello. Thanks for inviting me here. Today, I'm going to be talking about more so the sociology of memes and brain rot. I'm gonna basically try to give you a primer on what it is from a kind of a media studies perspective in particular. So, let's start by defining what brain rot is. The word brain rot, as you said, was named Oxford Word of the Year in 2024. And according to Oxford dictionaries, brain rot can refer to the deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state as a result of overconsumption of low-quality media. Or it can refer to the media that can lead to the referred deteriorated mental state. So, depending on this definition, and according to common parlance, brain rot can either mean a genre of content or a specific state of being. My role in today's event is to explain the first part, that is brain rot as a kind of internet content. I was going to show this video, but I think everyone saw enough Italian brain rot before the event, so I'm gonna actually not show the video and I want you to just imagine the images that we saw about 2 minutes ago. So, let me instead explain how I will approach brain rot today. I come from the humanities, specifically media studies. This is a discipline which examines the impacts of mass media and popular culture, and my specialty is platform content, namely memes and viral mimetic media. So coming from this field, I've basically distilled 3 ways that we can understand brain rot content. Firstly, we can see brain rot as the cultural products that result from the increased use of generative AI for business or financial purposes, basically content farming. Or we can understand brain rot as part of contemporary internet vernacular, which means internet slang or internet speech. And finally, we can place brain rot as another addition to digital folklore, which are stories, narratives, and forms of creativity that emerge from people's use of digital technologies, particularly, in this case, the internet. So, let's begin with the first explanation. Generative AI has become more ubiquitous as ever in cultural spaces and media environments. It's easy to create an AI-generated image and text in the age of platform-based hustles and side gigs. Generative AI has really become a gateway for people wanting to make a quick buck on the internet. This happens through creator schemes and mostly online marketing techniques. So, you may have noticed, if anyone is still on Facebook, that as a result of this boom in generative AI and platform hustles, these creator schemes, Facebook is now full of what has been termed AI slop. AI slop is a term for low-quality AI-generated content, such as text, videos, or images that are poorly constructed, meaningless, or devoid of effort. It's comparable to spam, and it implies that the material is, number one, AI-generated, hastily produced, lacks coherence, and offers little to no value. And the phrase usually conveys a sort of disdain for content that feels automated, soulless, or clearly generated by without human oversight or mainly care. AI slop, like Shrimp Jesus, has a close connection to Brainrot content, as both seem to be predicated on similar aesthetic principles and financial incentives. So I'm mainly talking about Italian Brainrot content, since it's so viral these days, or maybe it's the tail end of its virality. But what AI slop and Brainrot content in this case share is that they're kind of grotesque, AI-generated, usually anthropomorphic animal-human object hybrids, which have the possibility of going viral through a surprise factor, which is usually made to maximize content or financial revenue. Interestingly, if you look for how to make AI slop or how to make Italian Brainrot, you'll see basically on YouTube, it's full of videos of people claiming that they made thousands of dollars or euros using generative AI tools to make, in this case, Italian Brainrot. And these users keep the content farming cycle going by firstly making the Brainrot content, and then in turn making Brainrot tutorials, therefore creating a sort of Brainrot bubble fed by generative AI. This is kind of an example of hype manufacturing and content creation. I think it's really it exemplifies a specific moment in platform history coming together with mass use of AI technologies. So therefore, we can see it as a sort of a natural result of AI-driven content economies, which in some ways operate like a multi-level marketing scheme. And also, I think it's important to mention the absurdity which makes Brainrot so funny or interesting or weird or grotesque. It also, this kind of incoherence or absurdity also benefits the creator, as they don't even have to plan or prompt anything coherent, no coherent storylines or narratives. In some way, I would say that it's even kind of more incoherent than AI slop on Facebook. So we could also argue that the more AI-coded its Brainrot content is, or the more uncanny it is, the funnier it becomes for people. With that, I want to slowly move on to the second part of the lecture, where I take you to kind of the internet vernacular or internet slang world. I'm sure you might have seen some of these videos where someone has a binder full of Brainrot, and they're subjecting the Brainrot to random civilians in public. I think this is a good example of how internet vernacular becomes IRL, or it slowly becomes accepted in the so-called real world. As I mentioned at the start of the lecture, Brainrot was selected as the 2024 Oxford Word of the Year. If we look at Oxford's previous Words of the Year, then we can see the impact of the internet on the contemporary English language. Because, for instance, the Word of the Year in 2023 was Riz, whereas the Word of the Year in 2022 was Goblin Mode. So Brainrot is now also obviously part of how people speak online and increasingly in real life. And in this word cloud, you can see examples of internet vernacular from the 2000s and 2010s when I was a young person on the internet. So I wanted to show you this word cloud so that we don't lose sight of the big picture and kind of get lost in the details of the specific kind of content. This is just a sign that there have been many words and terms like brain rot before, and there will continue to be more. And instead of overanalyzing what brain rot really is, I think we should see it as part of a larger tradition and change in practices of sociality, humor, and language games on the internet. It's maybe just a bit of fun. So in that vein, we can then view brain rot as a style or as a genre of memes that emerged sometime after the cursed meme boom of the 2020s. But what are the principal elements of this style of meme? Let's have a look together. So, here we have the anatomy of a brain rot meme, specifically from the Italian brain rot genre. In this example, we see who? Does anyone know who this is? Yeah, tralalero, tralala. So if we were to look at the basics of this meme, we can see that it starts with image and sound. It's usually audio-visual. We didn't hear the audio at the start of the lecture, but the sound is almost always text-to-speech AI generated sound. And when it comes to the image, we can usually expect to see a main character, usually, again, anthropomorphic, a humanized, non-human hybrid entity, half fish, half man, half stick, half person, half cappuccino, half woman. So the list goes on. And the sound we already talked about, but what is the sound saying? What is the voice telling us? It's usually something absurd, surreal, incoherent words or phrases that are in some way meant to entertain the viewer. Usually we see also the hybridization of multiple languages with English. And brain rot is also, through its embeddedness in the content economy, like we mentioned at the start, it's also by nature made to go viral and consumed quickly. So that's the anatomy of a brain rot style meme. I wanted to show some other examples of what I would consider brain rot from a different time and period, and some of these formal elements that we just talked about can be linked to previous examples from meme culture. So, for instance, the anthropomorphic non-human meme characters we see in Italian brain rot, we can also see in early YouTube brain rot from the 2000s, such as the annoying orange, or salad fingers. Does anyone remember salad fingers? Yeah. Unfortunately, right? And the absurdism and playfulness of the language games of tralalera, tralala, tung tung tung, so, etc. It can also be seen in 2010's deep-fried memes, in this case, E. And finally, the uncanny feeling we get from these AI-generated Italian brain rot memes, the kind of uncanny, grotesque feeling, I think, can be also felt in these cursed reaction pics, as in the case of cursed plankton. Can anyone hear his voice as they look at it? I think so. If you look at some sources, mainly, I think most sources online will explain that tung 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 sahur comes from an Indonesian meme. But when we look at the art movement of Italian futurism, we can also see several deliberate connections between the absurdism, irony, and language games of Italian brain rot and Italian futurist poetry and art. And if we look at, in this case, Marinetti's poetry, for instance, we see that they play with absurdity, typography, and speed in the same way that Italian brain rot does. And it may even share some political tendencies and desires, which I won't get into here. Here we are, finally. We can see brain rot and its compounding lore as a new addition to the ongoing kind of masterpiece that is digital folklore. And I want to kind of briefly explain what I mean by digital folklore. This is the only wall of text slide I have. So digital folklore encompasses the customs and traditions, elements of visual and textual audio culture that emerged from people's interactions with personal computer applications initially, and now smartphones. This started happening in the last decade of the 20th century and now is ongoing in our current century. So some examples of what we would consider digital folklore in media studies and sociology as well is things like urban legends, copypasta, conspiracy theories, but memes, of course, but also things like world building, fan fiction, speculative stories that people add their kind of own mark onto. The same sort of generative AI hustlers also add to the lore and world building around, again, I'm going to go with the Italian Brainrot. I think that's our theme today. For instance, if we look at this particular YouTuber, we can see that they're explaining how these Italian Brainrot characters are all interlocked with each other, how their stories are all related to each other. Whether the lore is inaccurate or accurate, or it's true or real, is basically irrelevant. What's really relevant is that it is being created, it's being disseminated, and making the internet more sloppy and less humanistic, one meme at a time. But at the same time, we can see it as part of some grand narrative that is now being created between not only people, but people, machines, algorithms, and ultimately generative AI technologies. So here was basically my explanation of Brainrot as a genre of content, and I'm gonna leave Brainrot as a state of being to the natural scientists among us. This kind of Brainrot as a state of being, I really refer to it as a place where we find this kind of boredom, numbness, and acceptance of our brains rotting in the waves of doom scrolling. But instead of attempting to explain what happens to your brain once you start consuming this stuff, I'm going to end my lecture and thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Idil. Then we're gonna go on to the question of actual rotting brains, if that's actually the case. Our next speaker is Associate Professor at the Developmental Psychology Department of the University of Amsterdam and Director of the Connected Minds Lab. His research focuses on the relation between changes in brain function and structure and the development of learning and decision making. Sorry, Wouter, you still have to sit through this. Can your brain rot from stupid content? Please welcome Dr. Wouter van den Bos.
Well, thanks for the kind introduction. All right. So I'm gonna give this story from the brain perspective. So for me, this is a little bit out of my comfort zone. I don't really do research on brain rot like previous speaker, but I do do research on social media and its impact on youth. And I think I have a few interesting things to say. This one's working? Right. So I guess the question is, is your brain rotting, right, from brain rot? And I think, my presentation can be really short because the answer is no, right? So not in the sense that, like sugar really, that feeds the bacteria and your teeth will rot. So there's a substance in there if you eat sweet stuff that actually rots your teeth. It's not the case that if you just watched all those clips here when you came in, now something happened to your brain, luckily, right? So that's not happening. But I think there is an interesting sort of analogy, and there was also in the definition, between brain rot and this idea of sort of empty calories. So people who are nutritionists really don't like that, but I think it's an interesting sort of term. So the idea is that you have certain foods like chips and you have 50 grams, you get lots of calories, but you don't get the nutrients you need. And then you have broccoli, whatever, everybody likes it. And very few calories, but lots of nutrients, right? So the same is like, if you think about it, like how you can spend time online, you can watch a lot of Italian Brainrot, and then, or you can do other things that actually have useful sort of content that gives your brain what it needs. Now, if, it's not a perfect analogy, but it made me think, so what then are sort of the, the sugar, salt, and fat of brain rot, right? So why do we actually like it? So because, these three things, they're all the fast food and chips, right? Basically, that is just salt, sugar, and fat put together. And your brain is sort of programmed to really like it. And then I was looking at this, and I really don't have the answers, right? So I tried to look up a few things. And I think there's more than 3 ingredients in brain rot, and people like different things, and the algorithms really know to find the flavors you like and to give you the stuff you really want to see, and keeps it really rewarding for you. But one of the things that we also saw in the previous talk is one on the top, right? The surprise, the novelty, the weirdness, the things that we also see in clickbait kind of things, right? So sort of this novelty thing, right? Sort of, you won't believe what will happen. There's a shark that has, like Nikes, or the stuff I really hate, these chicken or cake, these things that is actually always a cake, right? So, but still, it's interesting. There's something there, right? You see this and you're like, oh, let's see what this time, maybe it's actually chicken, and then, but it pulls you in, right? So, and it's basically, then you see it's a cake, and then you're like, oh, I knew it. But still, you can't really look away. And the question is like, okay, so why is it? So what's the thing? And, that really fits well with how we think now, big theory. I'm just going to do it very high level, but how the brain works. And the brain is being like a big prediction engine. So basically, it's always trying to predict what's currently happening and what will happen. Even your whole conscious experience is basically, according to this theory, what you predict is actually happening, not what's really happening. And then it's comparing those predictions with the stimuli that you see, and basically it's trying to minimize prediction error. So it's trying to minimize surprise, but it also doesn't like surprise and novelty, because the brain is really curious, it wants to learn, it wants to improve its model, and every time there's a surprise or there's something novel, that means there's something to learn. So basically, this is an intrinsic reward for the system because it got onto something. And so there's something you really like. So basically, these surprising things, these new things, and there's a lot of new stuff, although it may not be informative, but it sort of hacks the brain, we'll get to that, is a sort of a reward signal for the brain. There's another thing that's important to know about the brain, and I mean, there's different systems, there's a system that processes stuff you like and the other stuff you want, right? So they're very similar sometimes, and you want stuff you like, but there's a slight difference, right? So you like maybe cookies, then you also want cookies, then you eat a lot of cookies, and then you don't want cookies anymore. That's at least when the system is functioning correctly, you get something like the hypothalamus, doesn't really matter which region it is, but that basically starts signaling like, okay, I'm full, I don't want it anymore, right? Now, long time ago, also behavioral scientists, psychologists tried to figure out how you could basically hack that wanting part of the brain. Right? How to make it such that you get the 20 cookies and then still want more cookies, right? You really get sort of addicted to the cookies. And that system is the variable reward ratio. And that's also programmed into classic slot machines. So basically what you do is you don't give every time, like an animal in this case, so lots of the studies with animals, every time it presses a button, you'll give it food. Sometimes you will give it food, sometimes you won't, sometimes you give it a big cookie, then a small cookie, so it's all the time is a little bit different. And what they found in this research, and also works really well with the slot machines, is that people then get really motivated, and then they want to press the button over and over and over again, right? And this is also something that works in these algorithms. They're not trying to give you always the best memes or the best, brain rot content that you would like. Even if they figured out what you like, they will not give it. They will distribute it in a way that you want to keep searching. And then there's another thing, of course. If it's about cookies, you have this whole built-in system that you're not going to eat endless cookies because you'll die. But at some point you will stop. But information is a little bit different, right? It's more like money. It's like you like information, you want information, you get 20 informations, right? And you still like information and you still want the information, right? So you can actually also keep going, right? So this is, I guess also for the Brainrot content, it has these little surprises, it has these little elements which trick your brain into thinking you're learning something. And we all know, you watch this content for a long time and you don't remember even anything, right? So, but still, it feels like, oh, it's a cake. I learned something, right? So, and you keep going back and you keep wanting more. And this is interesting because you have these surveys, also people asking not only Gen Z, but asking, for instance, about TikTok. These are all TikTok users. If you ask TikTok users, half of them or more often report that they didn't want a TikTok to exist, right? So this is the difference between the liking and wanting. At some point you keep wanting it, so it's hard to stop using it, even though you don't like it, right? So now these things they can become really separated. So I think that really is the sort of the different, the danger of brain rot, right? So the danger of brain rot is not per se this one video that has no content, but it's, and I think this was also in the definition you showed, the overuse, right? So, and with overuse, you can get time displacement, right? So basically, you don't do stuff you want to do. And if we ask, this is from a study with kids, but also parents, also students, this is always in Dutch, but if we ask them, like, are you often online or on TikTok longer than you plan to be? A lot of people agree. So do people here ever experience that? I think so, yeah, right? So that's the thing. So you're spending more time, and that may have some impact. So a little detour on how that might impact the brain. Say a little bit about brain development, also because I work at the Department of Developmental Psychology. Just to get some idea about who is under 25. Right, okay, so this is about you as well. So initially, long time ago, now already, we thought that brain development ended around 10 years of age, because at 10 years of age, the size of the brain, and actually also the head, is the size of an adult brain, right? So it doesn't grow anymore. Initially it makes really, it's growing in size and then it sort of plateaus. But more recently, using these more advanced techniques like fMRI or MRI, we can measure the structure and function of the brain, and we found out that actually still huge changes happen in the brain up until at least the age of 25, right? And I will also give some high-level sort of overview for what's happening during that time. So this is really cartoon basic neuroscience, right? So you have white matter and gray matter. And you have lots of cells in the brain, but the neuron is basically one of the most important cells doing all the computational work. And it has a cell body, and the cell body is the gray matter, that's where the computation is happening. Then you have this long thing, which is called an axon. And at the end, you have it's called the axon ending. It's not so surprising, but it connects to all kinds of other neurons again. Also, that part, those connections, is the gray matter. And the axon in between, we're here with the purple parts, basically that's the white matter. So you can also see that in the middle, there's all the white matter, and on the edges, there's the gray matter. It's basically connecting all the different parts of the brain. Now, when you're born, your brain is still making lots of connections. So basically, most of the neurons are already in place, but these neurons are connecting and connecting with each other just randomly, right? So you see this increase here, this cartoon version, increase of all these different neurons, all the connections between the neurons. This is called synaptogenesis, and this is followed by pruning. And pruning is basically cutting away all the connections you don't need. So this means your brains are very plastic, you can learn easily. You can still learn stuff after these periods, but now you can learn a lot easier. And basically, the connections that you use in your brain, they stay, and the other ones, they basically die off. And then it becomes a really efficient network. What you see here is the brain from the top. And basically, this animation is showing which brain regions are maturing first. So when it turns sort of pink, it becomes sort of adult level gray matter. And what we see is that on the top, that's the front of the brain, on the bottom, that's the back of the brain, you see the brain from above. Yeah. So you see that there's different regions that mature earlier, and this is another graph that shows that. You see these up and down sort of curves, and these show this process of this growing of all these connections, and then this decline of connections. So first your visual cortex and your motor cortex mature because, well, of course you have to move and you have to see. And then this higher cognitive functions, the prefrontal cortex, is actually here on the graph, it's only to 16, but it's actually extending into the 20s, is still developing. And also that white matter, so I showed you these neurons, they build this layer of fat around it. Those make the signal, as you can see in the animation, go a lot faster, and this is also something that still needs to be built in many places of the brain. So basically your brain processing speed is still going up until, and these changes you can see until 20s, early 20s. Now here is a little bit of a catch. As I said before, it's like the connections you use, you keep, and the ones you don't use, you lose, right? So use it or lose it. Sounds really nice, but here you can also see what the effect is of where you grow up. So here you see two different conditions. This is a study with rats, a really famous study. On the left, condition A, they call that standard. That's a little bit sad. That means that in a lab, in standard condition is really poor, basically. So I like to call it the poor condition. And then on the right, they call the enriched condition. They gave the rats all kinds of stuff to play with, also actually more others, and a lot to do. And then later stage in their life, when they die, they can look at the neurons in the brain. And they can look at the number of connections. And you can see on the right, they have kept way more connections, so they've much more richer neural networks than the ones on the left. Right? So this tells you that how your brain develops and how rich the connections are really depends on what you do in your environment. You might already feel where this is going. Right, so this is another study, still high level. With humans, we can't really look at neurons, particularly not when they're alive, but we can look with fMRI at the gray matter of the brain and look how thick the cortex is. And the thinner it is, that's basically a sign that there's less connections than when it's thicker. And here, this is from an American study, they also compared the cortical thickness to the income of the family, assuming that if you're poor, you live in a poor environment like the rats, and if you're rich, you have much more stimulating environment. And they also found that those with a higher income had thicker brain, basically. So this is also happening after 25, I have to say. But these effects, and that's why we're so interested in youth, also in student population using, for instance, social media. It's like it will have a bigger impact when the brain is still developing than after. Here I have a couple more examples. So we did a big panel study, again asking a little bit more about time displacement. So this is again in Dutch, but there were a few things that stood out here where people indicated that, and these might also be familiar themes, that people use social media that might interact with actual social contact with real people, sleep, and physical activity. And here we can also look at what those things actually do to the brain. We also know this from, if we look at physical activity and actually having friends. This is also from those studies with mice and rats in these different environments. We know that if you give them a wheel, for instance, and they can run around, and they really love to do this, we can zoom into the brain and see what this does. This is an area called the hippocampus. It's really important for memory. It's the only part in your brain that actually makes new neurons every day. And here you can see the runners versus the controls, and you can see the runners also make a lot more new neurons, right? So, and they can also learn faster than the non-runners. So go running. So you can again see, like if you spend too much time on this, looking at brain rot, and if it's going to eat out of your exercise time, this will actually directly impact your brain. Here's a study with humans. Again, not that detailed, but we can also, again, look at this gray matter. And here, basically, people had these accelerometers for a while. We could see, how much time they spent sitting down or moving around during a week or longer. And then also correlate that with the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and showing the same thing. So sedentary time goes up, gray matter goes down. Right? Very clear correlation there. This is a little bit long title, a little bit ugly, but we find the same for social deprivation. In different studies, you can actually find that also due to circumstances or by choice, if people spend less time interacting with real people, we also see these decreases in gray matter. Sleep is a little bit different. I just like the title because it's a simplified model, and then it really isn't. That's why I picked it. But sleep is super important. We all know this, but it's also very important for one of the things that's basically for learning and memory. So if you want to remember stuff, this happens during sleep. And I don't need the sound per se. What we know from rats, we can actually measure. So what you see on the left was a rat running through a maze, and they have play cells in their brain. So we can see some of these cells are active if they're running through one part of the maze. And we can then record during the night when they sleep from the same neurons, and they can actually found that they basically replay what they did during the day. So they, in their dreams, we can see that they run through these mazes, except backwards and really fast. So they have a little bit weird dreams. But what they do is they consolidate their memories. If we basically if we wake them up when they're having that replay moment in their dreams, they will have less good memories of the maze than if they have those, right? So, and we all do this. And we actually also do this during the day, but sleep, therefore, is really, really important. So if you go to sleep less because you spend time scrolling, that also will impact your memory, but also your learning ability. This is the day after. Final thing, I think this is in time. So mind wandering. This is also something that's actually really important. Most people just call it being bored, but that's also really important, right? So it's basically not doing anything. If you look at lots of neuroscience studies, fMRI studies, we can see there's basically generally two states that the brain can be in. One is called the attention network, but it's task-based network. That's the brain doing something, attending stuff. So if you are scrolling through your feed, even if it's all this empty content, it's grabbing your attention, you're doing something, it's activating this network. But we also know, by just basically having people sit in a brain scanner and ask them to do nothing and be bored, or almost fall asleep, that this network actually deactivates, and you get this other network called the default mode network, so if the brain is not doing anything, being activated. And this is something that the brain, a state that the brain normally would be in for normal humans in normal times, evolutionary times basically, a lot of the time. There's lots of empty time, but now almost doesn't exist anymore. If you always grab your phone in any moment that you have to wait or whatever, right? You basically block your brain to be in that state. But we know that the state is also very important for creativity, because it's then sort of, that's why we call it mind wandering. It starts to wander, such as just to have random thoughts, but in that way also connecting some random ideas with each other and therefore coming up with creative ideas. We also see replay during these moments and basically sort of de-stresses the whole system. And we need this, so we basically have to be bored at some times. And that's also something you can displace, basically. So in itself, right, I think we have to think about it as a sort of, to one degree, like a digital diet. If you think what you spend online, like we have the schijf van 5, or the healthy plate, I think it's called, or something like that, right? You think about like how you put it in and which part you spend on that region. And if it's a decent part, like we can eat fast food and chips and all those things and be healthy as well, except if that's the only thing you eat. And of course, you also have to think about it in a sort of bigger context of time displacement, right? So then if you want to remember 2 things, then it's like that poor little neuron or that really rich one, right? So it's up to you. So that's it.
Thank you, Wouter. Idil, if you come up, we take a seat on the couch, and I'm sure there are questions. Maybe a first one then. Wouter, you talked about how social media is basically a slot machine. How can you be healthy when you're constantly behind a slot machine?
Well, you can't, right? So I think you can spend some time, but you have to be really clear about how much time you want to spend, right? And the apps are currently designed not to help you with this.
So how should people in the audience help themselves?
Well, there's sort of meta apps, I would say, right? Or you set timers, or you set locks, or you make some sort of friction between you and the app, right? So I don't want to advertise specific ones, but there's all kinds of apps, or you just remove them altogether.
Fair. Idil, is this something similar you see, that it's actually the ecosystem is designed, like we saw, like it's grifts, it's how do you get rich from making Tung Tung Sahur lore? Is this something you see as well?
In what way? Sorry.
In the sense that the ecosystem is designed to keep you there and not really to take a break.
Yeah, these are called dark patterns, and programmers build dark patterns in the style of slot machines into apps to keep you on there longer. For instance, if you've ever played Candy Crush, you know that it's a notorious for its dark patterns and nudges that keeps you on it by having like little animals that start crying when you want to like leave the app. Same with Duolingo, which I saw that you used as an example. Duolingo is a similar sort of app where the owl starts crying, or when you want to leave. So it works very similarly.
So there's actually not an easy way to escape this. Remove it, or meta apps we don't want to advertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta mention there's questions. My colleague has a microphone, so if you have a question, just raise your hand. See one in the middle. Let's go there first, and just raise your hand again if you have something to add.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first one, I wanted to know if there has been any study into neurodivergent brains with social media, because it was saying like it was more active in tasks, but I can imagine that for people with ADHD, for example, that is their standard.
There haven't been so many studies actually on these different groups, but we do know they have people with ADHD have a harder time actually disengaging from the apps. So they might actually, they have harder time regulating their behavior. Once they get in, they get sucked in even like more generally than other. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The second one was, what is the effect of not having enriched neurons, like for future purposes?
What will the iPad kids look like in 20 years?
Well, it means it's harder to it doesn't mean you cannot learn anything anymore, right? You can learn for the rest of your life, and you can also make new connections, but it's just harder. And it's just a time during development where it's just easy to learn a few of these things, and it's easy to learn a language. Like kids almost learn it automatically, and you can learn it later, but it just becomes harder and harder. So you have to put more effort in it. So it's just a sort of a missed opportunity. It's not like gone forever, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
See a question in the front and then in the back. Lenya, you're gonna have to. Oh, and another question in the middle. Yeah, pass it down. That saves you some steps.
Thank you. To you, sir, I kind of reached a little epiphany. Maybe a bit off topic, but I was kind of like realizing that our brains are actually, they're constructed in a way by their biological makeup over which we had zero control. So I cannot control how my ancestors lived, how my mother took care of me when I was a fetus or as a baby, my childhood, my parents' socioeconomic status. All those things have a major impact on our brains, and I don't have any control over that. And then also our environments, it's totally out of our control. So how do you explain things like self-discipline or something? Can we really have self-discipline, or are our brains just running their own programs?
Ooh.
Is life determined?
I think you can learn self-discipline. So I think the brain can actually learn these things. So by practice, right? So you can actually, and this is also a thing that if you learn that earlier, it's easier than if you learn later. But it's always sort of willing to learn, and it's actually also one of the goals actually it's also trying to actually being a better predictor, also getting more control over the environment. So it's also sort of intrinsic to the system to try to get more control, if you understand what I mean. So it is actually, it's part of our agency. It's also looking for ways of finding agency.
How can there be agency if our brains, like there are trillions of neurons, where is that agency? Like, is there like some sort of homunculus, sort of like a man, deciding, like, how do you explain that?
Solve this philosophical conundrum.
And this is
Maybe I'm reaching like into a free will debate. That's not my.
Yeah, it feels like we're going there, but I would say it's sort of more like an emergent property of these higher order predictions to get also higher order goals. It's getting, the more and more control you get over the environment, the more complex goals you also can develop, and the more complex behaviors you can get, the longer term plans you can make, the less you are responding directly to the stimuli in front of you, because you now can also predict what's going to happen in 3 days, and then you can also already make plans, and you're not just responding anymore, right? But you're actually executing long-term plans. So that, I think that comes close to.
I think we can do a lecture, on free will later in the year with a philosopher.
Yeah.
I saw some hands before. Yeah, it's all the way over there, Lenya. Suspense.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you first of all. But I was wondering, because, okay, I see, of course, on the individual level, this is not very healthy, especially an overconsumption of it. But on a broader scale, what do you guys think are the societal implications of this? Because, honestly, God, like, I don't find Brainrot to be that bad. I mean, it's pretty stupid and absurd, but it's internet humor that, for the first time ever, isn't really targeting any marginalized group or being based off, oh, there's a kid that fell down or something. It's just stupid. How bad is it actually on a like broader scale for us?
Give
You, what
this
do you
to the
think?
sociologists.
I mean, humor, it's really hard to make any sort of like moralistic judgment about humor, because if you dig deep enough, the crocodilo bombardillo is also, it's been said that it's a fascist meme, that it's it's warlike. So there's everyone's gonna have a different I think explanation, perspective on internet humor. And we were also talking about the kind of meme culture operates as a kind of an in-group, out-group thing, where if you understand the meme, you're part of the in-group, and therefore you feel probably, you think it's funnier, you feel some sort of social cohesion with other people who understand the meme, and if you don't understand it, you either think it's irrelevant or you feel a little bit alienated from a part of culture that, you know, you might not be a part of. So I don't think it's good or bad, it's just, I also think of memes and humor as something that humans have always been engaged in. There's the kind of debate that, you know, were cave paintings memes? Were they meant to be funny? We don't really know. So it's, I think I agree with you that it's not bad or good, it just is, and it's a sort of reflection of things like the socio-material, you know, reality of today's world, and also people's need for maybe some like absurd, stupid fun in an increasingly complex world. That's my answer.
Wouter, how do you see it? Because you also thought it's mostly about displacement, but it displaces more time than more, for example, maybe something that you could only watch on TV once a week.
Yeah, maybe. So I also want to set something straight. So of course I ended with all this sort of maybe scary stuff, like, but in the end I don't think it's that bad, right? So I do think most people know to regulate it quite well, and we had these moral panics about all the other things like MTV. We talked about this a little bit before, and I think on the whole it's not like we should be really worried about this, but indeed it is this combination also with these algorithms that make the danger for displacement higher, but that's not actually particularly to the brain rot, right? Well, to the extent that it's sort of empty content, but like this makes it different from previous sort of moral panics about, I guess, media things, because at some point, you know, now it's just easier to get bigger time displacement.
Clear? Any more questions? Yes, all the way in the back, and then we'll move down and to the middle.
I actually had a question about like the differences if you look at age groups, because there's even like jokes now basically making fun of old people that they believe AI, that they think it's reality. So like mostly those, you know, Facebook slop stuff, they actually believe it. And like even recently my mom sent me like this picture of, I think it was Eminem's baby, and he was being held by 50 Cent, but that's fake. She was like, wow, he's such a nice rapper. And I was like, this is not real. So is there like a study done or anything that kind of maybe shows that the brain for like older people, or is it maybe generational? Like how would you explain those differences? Is it just media literacy? Like what is the any explanation for it?
Yeah, I think partly that's indeed media literacy and knowing what's going on, and the developments are going so quickly, because I've also seen somewhat older people looking at all these, or tiny houses or all this AI slop kind of thing. I think it's real, because they don't know yet, but also younger kids on the same end also have the same issue. So they also believe that it was, 50 Cent's baby with Eminem. So there's, you're either too old or too young to really understand what's going on yet. So they have to learn that this is now the current environment where, it looks real is not enough, sort of in terms of a judgment whether it might be real.
I think the issue occurs when people start voting based on kind of AI slop. So I think that's when it becomes like truly dangerous. Is children can't vote, but older people can. So I think there needs to be some sort of intervention in like digital literacy, so that people aren't like led astray by AI slop.
But how does that look? Right now we have Shrimp Jesus, who's, clearly not real. But how would that look if AI is ever becoming increasingly realistic?
Yeah, that's. Do you remember? There used to be all those like news articles about how someone saw, Jesus in a piece of toast and stuff like that. So, I think it's also just part of culture, right? There's trashy culture, low culture, high culture.
It's just moving online.
Yeah.
Clear. Are there ways to improve media literacy, Wouter?
It's yes, but it's really hard, right? So I've also been involved in a few studies where you try to sort of educate people in the direction of recognizing misinformation. And it's really hard because basically often happens that people just get skeptical about everything. So they don't get, they don't believe the misinformation anymore, but then they also don't believe many other things. It's really hard to, and that's also because it becomes so hard, right? There's no real clear signals. You really only understand it if you have a huge understanding of the whole world, right? So it used to be like pretty clear. If you look at some science that was also with the AI in the beginning, right? They had like weird fingers or whatever. Like, but now it's just like there's nothing on the outside that tells you this is misinformation or some constructed picture. So then you can show people lots of things and say, look, these are all examples of misinformation, false news, and then it's like, okay, now, yeah, people. So it's hard. It's really hard.
Not a very positive.
No, yeah. I guess we have to think about do we want to make the platforms, and that it's always really clear whether it's like on a blockchain or whatever, say like this is made by you, this is real, this is a fake picture, right? This is constructed. We need to have some distinction criteria to help people at least sift through these things.
I think that now with like fake humans, they're trying to like analyze the bloodstream, right, in AI, so that with AI direct detection, so it might exist one day. Maybe.
Maybe.
Don't know.
Yeah, no. It's also taking a very different direction.
I saw a question in the middle and then in the front more. Yeah, there.
Thanks. I have two questions. The first one is, why do you consider that the examples you put as Brainrot in the early 2010 haven't had such a big impact in societies because of the generational behaviors or maybe technology?
I think maybe I'll kind of take the easy way out and just say that there weren't as many people interested in looking at these things at the time. The other thing is that the internet has become very centralized on a handful of platforms. So we were also mentioning previously that in the early 2000s, there was a bunch of websites that you would go to. You would actually go to websites instead of platforms. So there was quite a lot of, I think, distribution of internet users across a variety of virtual spaces. So, and also there were less people on there, I think. So I would say the reason is because of that, like the kind of centralization of platforms today, and the fact that there's just more people online makes these sorts of things more viral and more, I think, in the public discourse, seen in the public discourse.
Thank you. And my second question is, if it was up to you, let's say in your house for your children, would you allow them to consume this kind of content maybe as an entertainment, as enrichment, or it will be better to totally ban it?
Is Coco Melon banned in your houses?
What do you think?
Yes.
Well,
that was.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
I would probably. I think I do something in between, right? Sort of. Depending on the age, but would say like as I said, like really young kids with these developing brains, I would not put them on the screen. But if it's a teenager, I can say, okay, you can watch Italian Brainrot for entertainment, and that's fine. But let's put a limit. I actually had this discussion with my daughter, who is 13. I was like, how much do you think you need to see this to be able, like also for the social reasons of being able to also talk about the stuff, right? It's also very important. Like there's a bigger context, and then basically, well, in 5 minutes, you can see everything. I said, okay, I'll give you 10, right? So and then there's a limit of 10 minutes on TikTok, and I think that's everybody has to see for himself. But I think I would not recommend just saying like to a 13-year-old, just see. Like you open the app and then whenever you feel like stopping doing it, I think it's not a good idea.
Idil, how do you see this as someone who has to be terminally online for your research?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out well for me, obviously. Yeah, my parents had no idea what I was doing online. So it kind of, I mean, I was so terminally online that I thought, okay, maybe I should start doing like public speaking.
Make a job out of it.
Yeah. So if you're really dedicated, you know, and being online, it can actually work for you. I also hear that a lot of like young people, when you ask like younger children what they want to be, they want to be a YouTuber. So that's also like, I don't know if you saw that survey where it used to be doctor, engineer, whatever.
It's influencer.
Yeah,
Yep.
now it's influencer, YouTuber. So, and there are like all these examples in which YouTubers or what have you, they become extremely impactful. I mean, if you know the Twitch streamer Speed, I think he's called. He was in China recently, and people were saying, "Oh, he's done more for international diplomacy than the UN, etc." So they're also these people are having like greater and greater impact. Like terminally online people have more and more impact on the world, and so it's kind of I don't know. Maybe we can do like a experiment, a control group and a terminally online group.
I don't know if the ethics commission at the university would
No,
allow
I
that.
don't.
There was a question in the middle somewhere, yeah?
So, well, with memes all having a very iterative character, it really seems like they provide a lot of commentary on each other. Like, for example, the current AI Brainrot is, I would say, in a way, commentary on the Facebook AI Brainrot. So there are definitely multiple layers of irony involved, and I was wondering, how could you explain the usage and role of this irony through from a sociological perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's so many ways to answer it. I don't know how to approach it because you could. I guess the best way to explain it is that meme culture is culture now. So it used to be. I think there was a clear delineation between meme culture and IRL culture in like the 2000s, even going up to the 2020s. And I feel like now we're in a sort of era where meme culture and real culture are so intertwined. So you see the same things that you might see, let's say, I mean, this may be a little bit extreme, but if you were to read like some sort of like novel, short novel, you might find the same style, like literary metaphors and sort of literary tools that are used in written culture. You might see the same thing in meme culture because people, I mean, my PhD was on how people make a living out of making memes. So if you look at these people, they call themselves multimedia artists, and they have an oeuvre, you know, and which speak to each other and speak to other people. So I think the use of irony in memes is just like the use of irony in literature or other forms of culture at this point. So I think we can see them in a similar way. Maybe it's a little bit extreme to say that, but that's kind of what I believe.
We're here to examine memes like as a form of high art, of course.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, let's go up and then go down.
I was wondering, how does the brain deal with the absurdity of these images? Do we kind of like shut down? Are we like deers in headlights when we see a crocodile in an airplane? Do we go into a kind of fighting response where we try to like figure out what is happening here? Is it more of an active response? Do we just get overwhelmed and start laughing? How does the brain deal with this?
I think these images all find this sweet spot of not being like too absurd, right? Then at some point the brain will give up if it's not able to make anything out of it. It will be just overload, right? But now it's actually exactly, it's like you're like, oh, it's a cactus and an elephant, right? So it's not like super complex, but it's like, but it's putting it together. It's trying to make sense of it, and it's just on that level that it's sort of exciting and grabbing attention. So you can't, and that's the same thing with this stupid cake stuff. You can't really look away. You have to see it. And here also, your brain is more like sort of the deer in the headlights kind of thing. You're like, it's grabbing the attention just long enough, and then there's an explosion or something, right? So, I mean, also, it's not that, I mean, that's why there's also all these cuts and there's the music and the sound, because if the picture by itself would just be a little bit too simple, it was easy to figure out that's actually a cactus and an elephant or something. So I guess, but yeah, that's what they exactly find, that sweet spot. That's also one thing to find out. Like if you want to have these type of memes or these type of content, that you find the sweet spot where you people like, hey, wait a minute, that's a tiny house, and then that's enough, right? Then you have them, and then if you then keep just moving around stuff, you have the brain's attention.
Endless variations on the same theme as we saw at the introduction.
Yeah, and also like real quick, these transitions and these stupid explosions that don't add anything, but some movement, right? So otherwise you would, and that's why sometimes have these, we talked about these split screens, right? Sort of, people can't watch an interview, it's too long, it's boring, then you also watch like Subway Surfer underneath, so you can switch around and your brain is just on that level of stimulation that that it keeps paying attention.
Just enough, but just not too much.
Yeah, not too much.
Any more questions? Let's go there and then move back down. Yeah, a little bit up. A few slides.
Thank you. So I have two questions. The first one is, I also saw online there's a lot of like German brain rot and stuff, and I'm Italian, so maybe I don't really understand. Like, why do you think really like Italian brain rot got super viral? Because maybe for the fact that I can speak the language and I know the bad stuff that Bombardiero Crocodilo or Trallalero Tralala are saying. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think is there any reason why specifically the Italian brain rot became more popular than, I don't know, German brain rot or?
I had a conversation about this with someone. We were trying to understand. That's like a really fair question. Like, why is it Italian brain rot? And this isn't, obviously it's not scientific, but our kind of conclusion was that it's kind of Italian is kind of a playful language, right? Naturally, the generalization is that it's kind of dramatic, playful, melodic. So I think all of that combined into like these language games, it becomes a little bit more interesting. Like German brain rot has a different character because we have certain like stereotypes about German being like, maybe it's kind of funny but in a different way. So like Schmetterling means butterfly. It sounds so violent, but it's something so nice. And so you have these, I think, different like maybe cultural stereotypes that kind of feed into the popularization of these different language brain rots. The other thing that, this is just my hunch, is that previous to the height of this style or meme genre viral phenomenon, I think there was like a year or a year and a half of a lot of like, my Italian boyfriend tries this, or my Italian boyfriend hates that sort of like content. Do you know what I'm talking about? This sort of like, there was a lot of like Italian meme content that preceded it. So I feel like that like really laid the groundwork for a general acceptance of something like Italian brain rot.
Okay, fair. Sorry, I'm just laughing because I exactly know what you're talking about.
Okay.
It's very funny. And the other question is a bit more maybe deep. Like, I saw a creator that mentioned that brain rot is really tied to our like capitalistic society, the fact that we have to work maybe 8 or more hours per day and then we have to use our brain a lot. So then, when we have, let's say, time off, we just consume this very stupid stuff because all day we're forced to like work and we're not really made to work that much. I don't know, is there any studies that link capitalism and brain rot, or, I don't know, economic crisis and brain rot? This is just random. But
I don't know of any studies. Maybe you can write an essay on it. I think there's a lot of kind of, I guess, like anti-capitalist critique of obviously work, but also internet culture. Would I say that I think maybe we're not working more than probably our previous generations? We're probably working less and living a little bit more comfortably these days, but perhaps what we're not doing is doing well, people are doing it, but for instance, compared to maybe my grandparents' generation, I do a lot less physical labor, and I'm more sedentary, and like you said, we probably are doing a lot of like brain-based labor, whatever that might mean. So by the end of it, we probably feel a degree of malaise, and we kind of, I like saying we brain rot while bed rotting. So it's usually, I also find it interesting that brain rotting is usually done in bed, and it's called bed rotting. So I guess there's some, we could also read it as like as also like resistance against capitalism. So like refusing to work and just consuming lots of culture. You could make an argument that it's like anti-capitalist or something. I don't know.
You can always make an argument that something.
It's the humanities, right? So discourse is endless.
Wouter, maybe from a perspective of the brain, is there studies done that maybe if you are mentally tired or after a long workday, it's more difficult to not engage in this type of content?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. There's not really these studies on that, right? There's some of these theories, but they're sort of debunked, that you have this mental capacity that drains, and then at some point you can't do complicated things anymore. But that is actually not proven to be true. So I don't really buy it. I also think that, but I also think that previously people, I mean, watched really stupid things on TV that also just that didn't really mean anything, like sitcoms or whatever. Like it's not really that different, maybe.
Simpsons brain rot.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of Family
right.
Guy short clips on YouTube.
Yeah.
More questions. I saw some hands before. Let's go here to the middle, then here, and then back up.
You talked about time displacement as the greatest risk of, or as a significant risk in consuming this content, and I was wondering if consuming this empty content has an effect of, or if there's been research done of what kind of effect it has on how we engage with more complex content, so that is less stimulating, less flashy, less just on the verge of being overstimulating, so that it's kind of, that it lacks that thrill.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think that's a question a lot of researchers have and are currently looking at, because the idea is that people, it's a popular idea that people now have, a harder time to concentrate and don't read books, and because of watching all this content. And I don't think, there's no real evidence that your attention span is actually declining if you watch a lot of, if you watch some of this content. But you might get used to getting all these quick rewards, that it becomes somewhat, harder than to read a book or watch a movie where the reward's all the way in the end, basically, right? So that might be true, and definitely something we're also looking into, just to see also across development, because then we can see kids, when they actually, there's also this kink somewhere when they go to high school, but it's always been there, that they stop reading. So they read a lot in primary school, and then they go to high school, and then reading, really significantly drops. And now, that was already hard, but it seems indeed now it's even harder to get them in a book, where you have to pay attention, and the pace is extremely slow compared to this. So yeah, we're running the studies. I will be back in like 3 years, and I will tell you.
It's actually been a big problem in everybody's.
But you probably can't wait 3 years, yeah.
There was a question here, like just in front of you.
What are your thoughts on infinite scrolling?
Bad idea. Like so. So that, yeah, so like the way it's set up right now, right? So you, as I said, you can sort of hack this wanting thing, and then there's also, you can infinitely you never get sort of satiated. You never, you always keep sort of being hungry. So that's why you keep going, way beyond than often. Like as I ask you, and then we find in the research all the time, people, they will go online to do even something else, or just to go 10 minutes, and they almost by definition always go longer on the platform than they actually planned. So it's really not a feature made for users, clearly. So, and if you ask most people, like, do you want this? They say no, but it's not optional yet, right? So I would be fine if that would be. So there's now on European level, right, on the Digital Fairness Act, I don't know if you know, but they're trying to get regulation around this specifically also, to sort of ban this.
So maybe someday soon.
Yeah.
There was a hand in the middle, I think, somewhere. Yes, let's go there.
I know you mentioned that this is like, for the first time in a long time, online culture is translating into IRL culture, which I think is further demonstrated by the fact that a lot of marketing campaigns of like serious products are internet memes. But do you think, as bad as it is for the brain, it is unique that everyone from every country, every like place has a similar culture while growing up? And do you think this is going to maybe affect the society in a better way if, for the first time, a person from Georgia can relate into culture with person from, I don't know, like any other, like America or something? Do you think this is going to positively affect maybe the society?
I think we saw Hema with Broes il Tompoes not too long ago as an example of this.
Was that for me? Question. Okay, maybe we can both talk about it. Because I was like, ooh, the brain. I don't know anything about that. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. It's an interesting question. Is it good for society? It's gonna be like one of those answers where I say yes and no. So like, yes, it's good because I guess there's more kind of cultural communication, intercultural, transnational communication than there's ever been. People, I know, like people make friends online from different countries because, I don't know, they stan the same K-pop group, or they are interested in the same kind of memes, or they watch the same kind of. So on one hand, it does, I think, bring people closer together. At the same time, it is also largely kind of Americanized culture. So it's when we're talking about would a person in like Georgia be like them being able to communicate with someone in America or have the same interests, it usually means that they have the interests that of an American, perhaps. So it's less so that I assume it would be less common for someone from the US to know anything about like Georgian cultural products. So we're also talking about something like we're talking about like American cultural hegemony translating into something else. Maybe there's changes with other kind of big like cultural products. Like I know like South Korea, there's a lot of like cultural production exportation from there, but I think we're probably becoming more Americanized over time. I'm not American, but I have an American accent kind of a little bit. So that's also, I think, a result of me just watching a lot of like American TV shows and like picking that up. So yes and no. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Let's go up to the middle, and then maybe you will stay for a few other questions downstairs.
So before you hinted at the fact that humor is derived from the time and the people, so I was wondering what makes Gen Z and younger generations and 2010s and 2020s so special that they birthed Brainrot? What's the cultural force behind those types of humor emerging?
I think it's probably like the platformization of everyday life. That's kind of the quick like media studies answer. I wouldn't say that like the term brain rot itself is new, and it was, yeah, definitely it's a kind of a result of like Gen Z cultural production. But I think the idea of brain rot, if we kind of look into it a little bit more, it's existed throughout centuries in different forms and different like intensities. So you can think of something like Jersey Shore. That's like brain rot in my opinion. All these like reality shows that were so that also like created their own language, their own like kind of memes within their own world. That's kind of, you can say that's in some way related to brain rot. What makes brain rot so, I think, specific is this kind of infinite scrolling. It's the speed with which you can create materials. It's how cheaply you can make like a completely original audiovisual like product. It's so cheap, it's so easy to disseminate, it's really quick to consume. So I think when we talk about brain rot, we're also talking about like the acceleration of culture and the acceleration of society, so speed basically. And I think that's probably the main detail that makes it special. Yeah.
Did brain rot make us, or did we make brain rot? That's the question. Yes, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you at one of our other events. Please give a warm applause for Idil and Wouter. And I guess safe scrolling.